July 3, 1985. A movie that had been rejected by several studios until filmmakers Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale took an idea that Bob had had to their friend Steven Spielberg of what many regard as the ultimate time travel adventure to this day. With the combined efforts of a great soundtrack that would include 2 legendary tracks from Huey Lewis and the News, great acting from the irreplaceable Christopher Lloyd as the Doc, and the best Marty McFly in the beloved Michael J. Fox, Bob and Bob gave us the timeless Back to the Future.
It's worth noting that the pitch had been rejected by some studios for not being edgy enough and some for being too risque. The movie didn't happen straight away due to Zemeckis having flops under Spielberg and wanted to have a success first before working on the project. And when 1984's Romancing the Stone became a hit, everyone wanted to work on Back to the Future. It's a very simple story based on an idea of when Bob Gale went through his father's high school yearbook and pondered the idea of what it would be like if he had befriended his father as a teenager. And that was the germ of an idea that spawned into the story. What if you take a teenager from the modern 1980s and put him in the past where his future parents are teenagers?
Oh, he would hate it. It'd be like sending a kid from circa 2015 to 1985 where there's no internet, DVDs, Blu-rays, nor social media. Although some would argue that would be better without the latter. Your mileage may vary.
But, on the upside, you'd have better TV, movies, and music by default.
That's pure bias on my part, and I accept that.
And what if the kid became a romantic interest of his future teenage mother? This is where the movie got rejected by Disney because they didn't want to tease the idea of an incestuous relationship.
And this is of course where they've completely missed the point. Lorraine Baines, as she was in 1955, is not even Marty's mother yet, because Marty was not born until 1968. Granted, I get their point that incest is not wincest, but at the same time, the story doesn't even play it like that.
What the movie does beautifully is send home the message that you can turn things around for yourself, and for the better. When you look at George McFly in the 1985 that Marty travelled from, George has no self-confidence, doesn't stand up for himself against Biff, doesn't have any notable spark with Lorraine, and is pretty much seen as pathetic. Whereas the George in the 1985 that Marty travels to on the thinking that he's gone back to the future that he travelled from originally, George is self-confident, has a lot of spark with Lorraine, and has Biff in fear of him for what transpired 30 years before at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance when he knocked Biff clean out.
The writing for this movie is solid, and it's one of the reasons why it's not only stayed as fresh today since 1985, but why it's also a masterpiece. You could not have cast anyone better for these roles, although Michael J. Fox as Marty McFly almost didn't happen. Originally, it was supposed to be Eric Stoltz as Marty. Now, Eric is a great actor. No denial there. If you ever see his scene-stealing performance in Mask, then you know this man has the acting chops. But it was observed as filming progressed that it just wasn't working.
Michael Fox had been in mind first to play Marty, but he had commitments to the sitcom Family Ties as its leading star as Alex P. Keaton, whilst Meredith Baxter was on maternity leave. They had approached Gary David Goldberg to get Michael to portray Marty before, but declined. But when the producers met with Goldberg again with the insistence that he was the right guy to play Marty, he looked over the script and let Michael read it, saying that he could do the picture provided that Family Ties came first.
Michael loved the script and operated on little to no sleep, shooting Family Ties by day and Back to the Future at night. And this is why Fox is such an amazing actor, because you cannot tell that he's only operating on 3 hours of sleep per day, because his energy as Marty is so infectiously charming.
The Doc. Christopher Lloyd, in my mind, is the only man that could do Emmett Brown justice with his energetic and eccentric performance as the man that built a time machine out of a DeLorean. And this clever use of the car would play well into part 3 with its stainless steel construction, as it would be intact after being buried for 75 years in an abandoned mine. What I find very rewarding about Lloyd's performance is that this is a man that is like a mentor figure to Marty in 1985 and is almost like a student to him in 1955 when he's learning about the future and himself from his future student. It sounds weird, but it's not. Doc learns as much from Marty as he teaches him, particularly instilling the concern of one man should not know too much about his own future, as much as he has endangered his own existence by interrupting the first meeting between his parents.
But it's because of Marty's warning from the future that he prepares himself for October 26, 1985.
Tom and Biff could not be further apart. Tom in real life is such a huge contrast to the nemesis of the McFly family past and present. Tom is very approachable, civil, and likable, whereas Biff is the token clueless poster meathead for 1-800 Where's My Brain At?
Whoa. Especially with gems like...
Why don't you make like a tree and get out of here?
Biff serves as the challenge for George to overcome as the subject of bullying and ridicule just for being a nerd and an outcast. Whereas today, calling a nerd is basically tantamount to kissing our backsides. And today, our response when being called a nerd is... Your point would be what? This is the most pivotal character in the picture. It is because of his actions and his future son mentoring him as well that changes the whole time frame of the McFly family from that point on and all of those around them in Hill Valley.
I don't think you could have cast anyone better to play a character that plays a pathetic nice guy in the former, present, and past to then playing a forthright version of himself where he takes no nonsense from anyone, that this then in turn is influenced onto his other children in David and Linda having more successful jobs and being in better places personally when compared to the original 1985 that Marty travelled from.
Like George McFly, Lorraine goes for a whole transformation from the present Marty left and then returns to. Lorraine is unhappy with life and love, and she's not exactly honest with her kids when she recants about her teenage years about not chasing nor calling boys. Whereas Marty's trip back to 1955 shows otherwise.
She plays the teenage version flawlessly as a girl that is wowed by this mysterious handsome stranger, who unbeknownst to her is her son from the future and just acts like a regular late teenage girl. Especially when she and others see him using what is supposedly the first skateboard ever when he's trying to escape Biff and his gang.
It's only when George kisses her for the first time at the dance that she not only falls in love with her future husband, but it was a point that the future and Marty's existence was hinging on that very moment. What we see with Leah's performance in the improved 1985 as Lorraine is basically a more distinguished version of her teenage self, where she's happy, loving life and love, shows that she's in great shape, and there's no bags under her eyes. The only visual effects in the movie are with the time travel sequences and Marty's hand, and they hold up incredibly well for a movie that is now 34 years young. But that said, the visual effects are maybe only 2% of the movie, and they only serve the means of Marty travelling back and forward through time.
And what you have to keep in mind is that this was made in the mid-80s, where visual effects were slowly evolving to what we have today. Not on the same level as that of, say, Jurassic Park, Transformers, or Iron Man, and they didn't need to be. I have the simple belief that if you keep it simple, you'll keep it more effective. As Deanna Russo said in the Knight Rider SG pilot, complicated isn't always better.
And she's absolutely right. Can't fault that.
I suppose the only minor critique is that the blue screen with Marty's hand fading near the third act hasn't aged too well, because the trained eye can tell the difference between what's superimposed and what is actually there. Granted, blue screen effects have improved greatly since this movie, but for 1985, this was the best they had to work with. One thing that Alan Silvestri is able to do with a movie score is make it feel bigger than it actually is. With the dramatic piece he put together with an adventurous and ambitious story as that of time travel, comedy, drama, and romance, he is able to take you into that story and empower scenes by making them tender and hook the viewer into it.
Such as the best example with the penultimate clock tower scene with Marty literally racing to the future. As the DeLorean etches closer to the wire, the score gets more dramatic and in turn, enhances the actors' performances.
The build-up is done expertly and is over with within the blink of an eye as the DeLorean's hook connects with the overhead wire. Once more, this is where the score shines masterfully. There is a moment of silence as the Doc takes in what has happened, and then the silence is broken with him cheering as the score kicks back in elevating his triumph in sending Marty back to 1985.
And it's no wonder why this score is still treasured 33 years later. Included with an amazing soundtrack that featured two iconic numbers from Huey Lewis and the News in Power of Love and Back in Time. And like the score, they're still held in high regard to this day. In short, this movie is a masterpiece. Everything from writing, casting, to score, special and visual effects have aged incredibly well to the point that it still feels as fresh as it was in 1985. Bob Gale said it the best. Parents saw this movie when they were kids, they show it to their kids, it just keeps on going.
This movie happened with the right crew, the right cast, at the right time. When you have a movie that has been beloved since its release and its appeal simply greatens with the passage of time, then you know you have something amazing on your hands. Even Michael J. Fox said it himself when he was attending an anniversary screening of it in 1999, "This will keep going." And the fact that 34 years later we are still endeared by his portrayal of Marty McFly speaks volumes.
Even Christopher Lloyd continues to play the Doc in commercials, movie cameos, and even reprising his role for the Back to the Future 25th and 30th anniversary video games from Telltale Games. Even Tom F. Wilson still gets praise for his performance after all this time. Then again, he was the best Biff.
Back to the Future would be followed with two back-to-back sequels in 1989 and 1990 respectively, to where the journey picked up from where it left off and concluded. An animated spin-off series was greenlit with Dan Castellaneta taking on the role of Doc Brown with David Kaufman playing Marty. Only Tom F. Wilson and Mary Steenburgen reprised their roles from the movie series as Biff and Clara, respectively, with Christopher Lloyd playing the Doc in live-action segments at the beginning and end.
Back to the Future sends home the message that no matter what circumstances you've been handed in life, you always have that chance to turn it all around and make life better for yourself. If you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything. All you have to do is make the first move.
And Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale are blocking all attempts at any potential reboots of this movie. Good. Because why wreck a classic? We all saw what happened with Ghostbusters in 2016. You don't reboot a classic.
Reboots should only happen if the original was terrible beyond recognition, and last time I checked, Back to the Future is a timeless masterpiece.
Have a comic book or video game continuation like with IDW or the Telltale Games, because they're not messing with what's already established. They're more like companion pieces that complement the story.
Back to the Future has more than stood the test of time with its releases on VHS, DVD and Blu-ray, and including anniversary cinema re-releases so that people could properly appreciate this movie as those that first did in 1985. I'm MJ Knight, and we've all come back to the future. Folks, look at what I have to read out. You know, I don't make it easy on myself, although one would argue I never had it easy to begin. Michael loved the script, and included with an amazing soundtrack are two iconic songs from Huey Lewis of the News? Okay, the news with Huey Lewis. Tonight's news, rock and roll is awesome. Yes, it is.